feel it in the room. I knew I would. And I feel it from these different communities, because there's at least 2 or 3 or 4 different communities represented here. You know he had the same kind of impact on each community. The one I represent, well, let's see, the story starts. This is how I have the story, and if it's not true, Kim, sorry, but I'm going to tell it like it is. Kim was a 6th grader and looking for a middle school, and she found one. Now, not every 6th grader does that sort of thing. I mean, that's someone looking for a school and finding one. And somehow Kim located this new school that was just opened, a brand new school, and said, that's where I'm going to go to school. And Rex and Barb, and this doesn't always happen, Rex and Barb listened to her and said, okay, and got themselves involved in this brand new school. Now that may sound exciting and whatnot to have a brand new school, but you realize what a risk that is. The school was starting from scratch, and who knew what might happen? So the school had 3 founders, 3 very different people, different educators. Paul Raymond from Manhattan, Kansas. Ellen Taussig, who is here with us today from the other Manhattan. Where's the other Manhattan? New York. And I was from Mercer Island, and the school is opening here in Seattle. I don't want to tell you the whole story of the Northwest School for lots of reasons, but Rex and Barb involved themselves in the school early on as happy, supportive parents that their daughter was in the school that she seemed to like, and it wasn't that good. And Rex joined the board of trustees. That was good. Within about a year, Rex was elected the president of the board of trustees, excuse me, and that was good. But now there's a community in the building right now that went through all this as teenagers. They were in the school as Kim was in those earliest years of the Northwest School. During those earliest years, the fact that the school had no capital foundation became very, very clear. We had tuition money, all right, but we didn't have capital, and it turns out you need capital when you start a large business. And a school with over 200 students is a large business. So before you know it, the school had lots of financial problems, and financial problems easily grew into political problems and political educational philosophy problems and all kinds of things. And so the school, in the early years of pretty much all of the former students who had come here, by about 1983, the school was ready to start falling apart. It was very fragile. So, without going into all the details, if you can picture a breakfast up in a diner up on Broadway in October of 1983, that was Rex's first action as the board president, who had somehow stayed through all the turmoil that had been going on. The school had shrunk by over 100 students. Dozens of faculty had left. The majority of the board of trustees had left. The school's death had been predicted in the newspapers. And so I became the second head of the school, well, third technically, but the second head of the school. And on a day in October, that's when that became clear, is that I would be head of the school. Not because of an ambition on my part, but just because I had to be. And Rex, as the president of the board, who had stayed through all of this turmoil, picture that. He stayed through all of this turmoil, watching all these things going on around him. When he discovered that I would be the head of the school, his first question to me was, well, can you meet me for breakfast the next morning? And the question at that breakfast was, how are we going to let Seattle know that the Northwest School is still here and still open and thriving, and when all this stuff has just gone on? So I don't want to go into all the details, but think about what that means, what that kind of a board leader is, who stays with the institution that he committed to. One thing I noticed about him is, as different as Paul and Ellen and I were and are, Rex appreciated each of us and got to know each of us and understood what this school was all about. And unlike many board members, people join boards for all sorts of reasons. Rex never wavered from simply wanting to support the school as it was conceived. And that's amazing. A lot of board members want to direct things, want to change things, want to put their stamp on things. Rex never wanted to put a stamp on the Northwest School. He just wanted to preserve the Northwest School through all of this. I had heard of and experienced some excerpts from an amazing music composition, the Missagaya, which was written for and first performed at the giant cathedral of St. John the Divine in Manhattan. And I've heard some of it back there actually, and Rex popped that question, and I said, well gosh, there's this thing called the Missagaya. Well, so what? So there's this thing called, well, wouldn't that be nice if we could get a performance of it here in Seattle? And of course, Rex was involved with St. Mark's Cathedral. I had been involved with St. Mark's Cathedral earlier, but not like Rex had. And Rex just went to work at that point to see if he could arrange, and if we could arrange as a school, to bring this music performance and mass to St. Mark's Cathedral. And as Carla will attest, on Mother's Day of 1984, that year that the school nearly broke apart, we filled the cathedral. We had people all the way out to the street. It was the Mother's Day Sunday of that year, and the Missagaya was performed in Seattle as a full mass for the first time. Now that's another extraordinary thing. A mass sponsored, prepared, I don't know. Anyway, here was the Northwest School, an entirely independent, unaffiliated, non-religious school, somehow sponsoring a mass performance at the cathedral. My point is not so much about that, it's that from there on in, Rex stayed with the school through its toughest times. And that meant reducing our board to the size of, I think it was 5 or 6 or 7 members, and meeting weekly. Weekly board meeting. He was a practicing attorney downtown, and he and Barb would host weekly meetings at their house of this small but effective board, trying to hold this institution together and make things work. Meanwhile, many of the people you're sitting next to here were finishing their sophomore, their junior, their senior years, expecting all along that the school would continue and they would graduate and life would be good. And it happened. The school did continue, and Rex simply stayed the course. I can't tell you all the stories that I could tell you, but we don't have nearly enough time. He looked out for us. He convened a meeting of the board to confront the AIDS epidemic before we absolutely had to. Brought in a medical practitioner who could talk to us about, well, how are doctors going to confront dealing with patients with AIDS and families of patients with AIDS and all that. How are we going to do it as a school? Meeting that ahead of time before it happened and thinking about what will be the humane approach of the school going forward. We had some serious, I got to tell you, I promised Kim I would tell you at least one story about how we dealt with a serious financial problem midway, because as we got on our feet, there were still plenty of financial problems on the way to getting, by the way, the school, in case you're worried, the school is still there. It has about 500 students, and it's actually completing, this coming year will be its 46th year. It finished its 45th year last year. Yeah. This year. Yeah. Anyhow, we had a board member who had loaned the school $100,000 early on. Very generous, wonderful thing for the board member to do. But he'd come on somewhat harder times. The student had left the school, and it's very reasonable. He needed his money back, but we didn't have anything like that we could pay him. And he wasn't listening to the fact that we couldn't. So we had to somehow convince this fellow that we were serious. Of course we wanted to pay him back, but we couldn't at the time. So Rex's skill, I'll never forget the meeting. Here we are down in the Seattle Tower, formerly called the Northern Life Tower. Rex had offices down there once. And we filled out the complete set of papers for filing bankruptcy. Now, not because we wanted to file bankruptcy, but that was the only way we were going to be able to convince this fellow. And so there's Rex's skill as a lawyer. We laid out the entire bankruptcy filing and finally took it to this fellow who remained nameless. Nice guy, I liked him a lot. He loaned us $100,000 and showed him. He said, okay. So he backed off. And then I think it was in the following year, I don't know, see if you can hold these things all together in your head. Here's a farmer who has picked up a design from the experts at Washington State University, where they really know how to do things, for a nearly fully automated hog farm that there's acreage for halfway between Cle Elum and Ellensburg, Thorpe, near Thorpe, if you know that area over there. And so that's one thing that's happening. That hog farm is being built by this farmer. Another thing that's happening is the farm has neighbors. And the neighbors include Stuart Anderson of the Stuart Anderson restaurant chain. And Stuart Anderson fully understood, and his neighbors probably did too, what the impact of a hog farm with this density would be. This was called a farrow to finish farm. Rex knew exactly what that meant from his youth in Montana. I didn't know what that meant. That means that little piglets are born there in the building and slaughtered there in the building later on. Everything happens in an automated fashion inside. So the neighbors sued. The farmer couldn't build his building. He had to get rid of it. Picture this. The farmer is a devout member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, and he's had a revelation. He's had a revelation of the truth of how things really went on in the Western Hemisphere when Christ came to the Western Hemisphere in the Mormon faith. And he's written it down. And he's tried to give it, the farm and his revelation, to his church, the Mormon Church. And the fathers of the Mormon Church said, no, we can't take your hog farm. Because his condition was they had to publish his revelation. And revelations are fine in churches when they happen in certain ways, but it wasn't going to work. He tried to give the hog farm to the Boy Scouts of America under the same conditions. If the Boy Scouts of America would simply publish his revelation, then they could have the hog farm. And through a series of odd connections that I don't have time for, we had a meeting with him. He was brought to the Northwest School, and we met, and we explained how seriously we took religion, that we studied it thoroughly in our humanities program, world religions, but no, we were not a denominational school, we were not a religious school, of course not. And no, of course we couldn't publish his revelation of the truth of the experience in the Western Hemisphere. He liked us best of all, and so the Northwest School was given a hog farm with Rex Stratton as the board president, with all of his experience of his dad as an agricultural financier banker based in Billings. I understand. In any case, Rex knew what to do. And so we contracted with Chuck Yarborough. I couldn't find my Chuck Yarborough hat, I'm so sorry. Chuck Yarborough is based in Moses Lake, and he runs agricultural auctions. And so Rex and I went over to the hog farm and watched as this auction team had taken apart all of the equipment. It was all beautiful, shiny equipment because there had never been a hog in the farm. It had all just been set up. And so it was a fabulous bargain for farmers to look at all this equipment laid out. There was hot dogs, there was refreshments, there was a band, this was a party. There were farmers from 3 different states who showed up. As all this equipment got auctioned off, I kept the office sign. I thought that was a nice thing to have. Okay, so that's the sign from this Porky Park, it was called. And we got serious, that was the name of it. And from that auction, which of course Rex understood, he looked at all this, smiling, beaming, with cowboy boots on. You know, I was there. There's one picture of me at the event, and I'm just standing there stunned like this. I don't know what's going on. We netted the amount of money that we owed this fellow from that original loan. We netted that amount of money from that equipment, and we sold the property to a sheep farmer who came up to us that day and said, "Could I just buy the property so I could run my sheep here at this time?" And he paid us over 10 years scholarship money being delivered all that time. So Rex, he understood what to do. He understood what to do to file the bankruptcy filing in the first place. He understood what to do with the hog farm. I'm going to wind toward a close here by saying As I left the directorship of the school, headship of the school, and became a teacher again, which I really wanted to do, and Rex left the board because time went on and lots of other people moved into those positions. We continued to have a relationship with Rex as our attorney for family business as things would come up. And I had to think about the fact that my image of a lawyer is somebody who I want to call up and want to talk to. I was glad when we had problems that had to be solved as a family because it meant talking with Rex, and that was worth the whole deal. And he served our family, my wife's family, my dear brother who died a few years ago, all got to know Rex over the years, and everyone looked forward to dealing with Rex. And I think, you know who he is, so I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. I'm just relating how I feel and see about it. This is a man who had nothing to sell, had nothing to prove, who would look at you, reflect your humanity, and try to figure out what it was you needed, and was there any way he could help. And that's just who he was. And with this wonderful sense of life and humor about it as well. And I understand he doesn't necessarily believe in an afterlife, and I'm not here to tell you that it's true or not, but I will enjoy talking with Rex if I have the opportunity again.